Okay, so you have the permission to share your screen, so you can present to us. Thank you.
No worries. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having us in this forum. And before I get started, I will just turn on my video real quickly to say hello. My name is Violet Katani, and I'm part of the Global Standards and Traceability team on USAID's GHSC PSM. I am also joined by my colleague, Tori Jean. Tori is part of our data strategy and governance team, so suppliers primarily work with her in terms of our requirements. I'm also joined by my colleague, Friday, who will talk a little bit more about the Nigeria procurement process. So with that, Friday, I'm not sure if you want to say hello, and I will, in the meantime, I will share my screen. Friday?
Please go ahead, Violet. He's going to show his face before he presents.
All right, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So thank you again for joining this session. Primarily today, we're going to really just cover about topics around supplier engagement for GHSC, PSM, and how our approach to engaging suppliers, as well as some of the concepts of GS1 standards that we have adopted, what we categorize as in-scope items, and how we measure compliance against those in-scope items using scorecards. Our supply requirements are really around all the pharmaceutical products that we procure, including LLIN specific supplier requirements. We'll also, in this presentation, just talk a little bit about some of the resources that we will have for you to look at after this session. This should be a very interactive session, so at any point, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I primarily work with the countries, meaning supporting countries on the adoption of GS1 standards. So I may not have the nuances to some of the questions, but again, I am joined by my colleague, Tori, who will also help in answering those questions. So basically, GHSC, PSM, Global Standard and Vision, our goals and objectives, really USAID's goal is to make sure that we're able to identify every item that is procured at every point in the supply chain, all the way through administering to the client. And the goal is to really to enable a secure and efficient supply chain from source to service delivery. So what are our main objectives? Our main objectives are through application of these supplier requirements, which we'll be discussing today, will be to enable end-to-end data visibility, to identify and implement efficient supply chain processes, ensure security, as well as ultimately what we all want to do is make sure that we achieve patient safety. So in this slide really just shows our approach to how we engage suppliers. So our approach to supplier engagement is really multifaceted. Intending to marry supplier support, meaning we're providing support to suppliers on the application of these requirements, but at the same time, holding them accountable to these requirements. This is intended to execute the contractual global standards requirement of suppliers that were created through a technical directive memo from USAID, which directed our program, USAID GHSC PSM, to implement global standards. So the global standards team, which Tori is a part of, provides the onboarding support, so really working hand in hand with the suppliers, as well as providing supplier education about what global standards are, what are the requirements, how do we ensure quality in the data, and how do we identify potential quality. So engaging with the suppliers, we engage with the suppliers around missing information and also being able to escalate non-compliance when necessary. The whole time we're monitoring for new products and requesting data for those items. We also provide technical troubleshooting. We also monitor project-wide compliance, and we report out to USAID, and we use this data internally to make our processes efficient. We also work very closely with our partners, including GS1, both global and for the country-facing work with different member organizations. I'm sure this is a slide which is familiar to many of us, but basically this here provides a snapshot of how our requirements are arranged. GS1 standards, as many may know, are really grouped around three main categories. At the top there, we have the identify category. We also, in the middle where the pink bar is, we have the capture category, and then we have the share. So let's start from the top. What do we mean when we say identify? The GS1 identification standards really focuses on assigning globally unique numbers to identify locations, trade items, logistic units, and assets, and even healthcare workers or patients. For the purpose of our discussion on supply chain, we will focus mainly on the three main pieces of the identify standard: the global location number, or the GLN, which identifies location, legal entities, and digital locations, and the global trade item number, or GTIN, which uniquely identifies trade items globally, the serial shipping container code, or SSCC, which uniquely identifies logistic units as they move through the supply chain. When you think about the SSCC, it's always helpful to think of it like a tracking number for your logistic unit. The second category, or the second standard in the pink there, is the capture standard. The GS1 Capture Standard focuses on encoding identification number and other characteristics in a data carrier so that data can be scanned and captured as it moves through the supply chain. For healthcare, there are two main capture technologies that are used: the GS1 128 linear barcode, which is on your left, which is generally used for larger packages. We also have the GS1 2D data metrics, which is 2D data metrics, which is used to primarily on the secondary package. So together, when you think about the concept of identify, we talked about the GTIN, the GLN, and then the capture, we talked about the data metrics. Together, when you put this together, it gives you automatic identification and data capture, or AIDC. The final group of standards is the share standard. And GS1 share standard focuses on how the different types of supply chain data are exchanged. These standards have been developed specifically for different types of data. So we will, in this discussion, we'll primarily focus on the GS1 Global Data Synchronization Network, or GDSN, for sharing master data. But there are also other standards such as the Electronic Data Interchange, or EDI, for transaction data, as well as the Electronic Product Code Information System, or EPCIS, for sharing event data. So this slide is very important, and it'll be a good idea to keep this slide in mind, as the requirements are really, for our requirements for suppliers are really developed around these three main GS1 standards. So let's talk about items which are in scope for PSM to the requirements before we go into the main requirements themselves. All global standards monitoring reflects a concept of in-scope items. The GHSC PSM catalog comprises of tens of thousands of products, but only a small fraction of them are actively procured at any given time. So in-scope rules are intended to focus our accountability and monitoring on those items that are commercialized and actively flowing through the GHSC PSM supply chain. In-scope items are defined as pharmaceuticals, medical devices, sterile kits, reagents, and alliance that are procured under a long-term contract, and they have been purchased at least once in the life of the project, and they are currently active or sellable in the catalog. All other items are not included in supplier scorecards and other reporting, although global standards data may still be collected and retained for them if available. We really encourage suppliers to provide data for all items under the contract where possible. So global standards, or GS1 score that is included in the supplier scorecard is a key mechanism for PSM to measure supplier compliance of our requirements and making that visible to leadership as well as USAID. It is also taking into account for allocation decisions. In order to get a score of 100%, suppliers must meet all global standards requirements detailed further in the slides. Please note that some suppliers have received extensions or exemptions on specific requirements and or specific products. However, all exemptions or changes require USAID's approval. So this slide, you will see how our program has implemented these requirements for suppliers. We have implemented supplier requirements in phases. There have been 4 phases in which suppliers must submit the required data for each phase by the phase deadline. This slide shows each GS1 standard requirement in the identify, capture, and share category that we just talked about. The suppliers have to submit for compliance. 3 of the phases have already passed over the project's lifetime, and the 4th phase is upcoming at the end of June this year. These phases have been very instrumental for supplier adjustment to becoming GS1 compliant. To encourage compliance, suppliers must have to submit the data by the required deadline in order to avoid a drop in that supplier score. We also have an alliance, as with other supply. This slide basically shows are supplier requirements for Alliance. So as with the other suppliers, the Alliance, long-lasting insecticide nets supplier group also have a phased timeline approach. Their timeline was accelerated in order to catch up with the rest of the supplier requirements. LLIN requirements are aligned with the other product category. LLINs are required to share GTINs, GLNs, and master data in GDSN, just like the other suppliers. They're also required to have GS1 compliant labels on individual nets, polybags, and the bell. For example, each bell for each level of packaging is required to be identified with the data metrics with the GTIN, batch lot, production date, and serial number. LLINs use production date instead of expiry date, which you would typically see on pharmaceutical due to the nature of their products. The polybag is required to have a GS1 data metrics with GTIN, batch lot number, and production date. And finally, the bell is required to have a GS1 128 barcode, SSCC, GTIN of contained items, batch lot, and production date. So now let's talk about the capture standards. As mentioned earlier, GS1 identification focuses on assigning globally unique numbers to identify locations, trade items, logistic units, assets, and even healthcare workers. The GTIN and the GLN, or the global location number, are the two main identifiers that we require from suppliers. And these identification numbers are foundational for suppliers to meet requirements. A GTIN is a GS1 identification key that is used to identify trade item and is made up of the GS1 company prefix, item reference, and the check digit. PSM requires suppliers to assign GTINs to all levels of packaging, including hierarchy, including each inner pack, intermediate pack, cases, pallets, where applicable. GLNs are GS1 identification keys, as we have discussed, used to identify physical locations or parties. PSM requires all suppliers to assign and provide GLNs for selling, to provide GLN for selling locations, manufacturing locations, shipping locations, and for data synchronization identification keys. But the GLNs are also a key to access information about the trade item that must be communicated to all the business partners. Unique identification keys can act as a source of truth, reducing manual administration, duplication, and errors. It is important to note that the GS1 identification keys are unique, non-significant, intentional, secure, and foundational. So why does PSM require data capture standards? GS1 data capture standards include definitions that allow GS1 identification keys and supplementary data to be affixed directly to a physical object. GS1 standards specifically specify consistent interfaces to readers, printers, and other hardware and software components that connect data carriers to business application. And finally, barcodes play a key role in supply chain by enabling parties like retailers, manufacturers, transport providers to automatically identify products as they move through the supply chain. And this is the reason why PSM requires that suppliers are able to provide, to adhere to the capture standards. So I mentioned earlier about requiring identification and capture standards on all different packaging levels. So this slide just basically helps to define the different hierarchy levels for a trade item. Again, a trade item is a specific instance of a product that can be ordered, priced, or invoiced at any point in the supply chain. So now let's take a look at this slide. If you start with the primary pack at the top of this slide, primary packaging is the first level of packaging that is in direct contact with the trade item. The next level in the hierarchy is the secondary pack. The secondary packaging is a level of packaging that may contain one or more primary packages or a group of primary packages containing a single item. We also have the tertiary packaging. Tertiary packaging refers to the upper levels of packaging hierarchies. Homogeneous tertiary packaging may be homogeneous tertiary packaging may be a pallet that contains usually one or more cases, a case that contains one or usually several items in the primary or secondary packaging. A mixed or a partial tertiary packaging can be partial, consisting of homogeneous pack of items that is not considered a trade item because it is less full, or mixed, either more the one unique trade item or entirely the same trade item with different batch numbers or expiry date. Let's take a look at how PSM's capture requirements differ at every hierarchy level. On the secondary pack, it is required that suppliers affix a GS1 data metrics symbology that is encoded with a GTIN, batch lot number, expiry date, and serial number. It also is required to have this data printed on a label as human readable interpretation, or HRI. For homogeneous tertiary packaging, a GS1 data metrics or a GS1 128 encoded with the necessary information is required. For mixed or partial tertiary packaging, a GS1 data metrics or 128 barcode is required, encoded with the SSCC, which is a serial shipping container code, which is a unique identification for logistic units. So the second phase for our requirement was the share phase. This required that all suppliers share their data through the Global Data Synchronization Network, or a GDSN. Master data is defined as descriptive data, typically used to refer to a product or a location. This could include information such as the product dimensions, handling requirement, registration information. Please note that master data does not contain any order data or transaction data. So master data will not include your batch lot numbers, for example. Sharing this data through GDSN allows suppliers to share one single source of data to any trading partner that participates in GDSN. This also allows suppliers to republish, update data at any time as it changes. GDSN data therefore provides a single source of truth directly from the supplier describing the products, and this information is then retrieved by PSM and maintained in our catalog. You may be thinking about what type of master data PSM collects through GDSN. PSM publishes an attribute guide to all suppliers that clearly indicates what type of data is required, along with the secondary set of suggested attributes that suppliers may provide where available. There are 3 different attributes lists available in that attribute guide, and these lists are for pharmaceuticals, alliance, and other products, for example, medical devices and lab reagents. Some examples of these attributes include product descriptions, classifications, market authorization information, and authorizations. So that basically wraps up just our overview of the requirements for suppliers. And in this slide deck, which will be shared after this presentation, you will find additional resources to read more about these requirements, which can be found on the GHSC PSM Global Standards website. We also have the technical implementation guides that we provide to suppliers as they are onboarded. Also, we provide a guide for synchronization implementation guide and the attribute guide. So with that, I will pause to see if there are any questions. If there are no further questions, I will pass it on to my colleague Friday to talk about eligibility steps for USAID procurement tenders. Friday.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Violet, for that wonderful presentation. Since there are no questions, I think Friday should come on to do his presentation. So you can stop sharing so that we can also share your screen. Thank you. So Friday, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Trying to project it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, perfect.
Good morning to you all. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, good morning, sir. Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so my name is, hello? Was someone trying to talk?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so my name is Pharmacist Friday Kiegar. I'm going to speak on the behalf of PSM. My slides are few, just 3. The topic given to me to speak on is eligibility steps for USAID Procurement Tenders. So we're going to look at the steps, the procedures, the quality requirements that local pharmaceuticals manufacturers in Nigeria can take so that they will be able to be found suitable to participate in any procurement opportunities. So as you can see, the first slide is touching all procurement activities that are guided by ADS 312. ADS stands for Automated Document System. So this document stipulates the quality requirement standards for any supplier or manufacturers to participate in USAID procurement opportunities or tenders. And the first requirement is the manufacturer or the product should be that is US FDA approved or approved by the stringent regulatory authorities. Example of the SRA will be like the European Medicine Agency, Health Canada, Swiss Medic, Japanese Ministry of Health. So these are SRA, some authorities that if your products are approved by these SRAs, then you are qualified, your product is qualified for US to give you the opportunity to participate in any tender so that in case you win, then it will be sure that the products you'll be supplied are meeting the quality standards required by USAID. The second one is WHO, World Health Organization, approved manufacturers and pre-qualified products. And the third one that we shall be looking at is USAID approved procurement agents / international wholesalers. So basically, these are the only three sources that are qualified to partake in the tenders for USAID donor-funded organizations. So we'll look at each one of them, how to attend. I'll be touching on the number 2 and 3. Since I'm talking to manufacturers in Nigeria, they are not wholesalers, so they will not be able to source from international like US or stringent. So we'll be looking in details, number 2 and 3, how to attend World Health Organization and the approved procurement agents. So recommended processes for attending the WHO. So I said manufacturers should be willing, the willingness and interest to invest in their operational and documentation process to improve on their quality standard by engaging the services of USP, promoting the quality of medicine, PQM+. Now, this USP stands for United States Pharmacopoeia, and this is a US mechanism-funded organization that is saddled with the responsibility of helping manufacturers to ensure the quality, the safety, and the efficacy of their medicines, especially for those medicines that are essential to meet USA priority diseases, such as malaria, HIV, and TB. So PQM Plus will assist to strengthen your QA and quality control system, and thereby helping you to be able to attend WHO GMP and thereafter pre-qualification of some products that you would like to project to participate in the USAID procurement tenders. So that's the process for attending WHO as far as PSM project is concerned. So this PQM Plus, like I said, is a free and then a funded mechanism to assist our local manufacturers in this aspect. The second slide talks about the recommendation for, if you want to participate in US procurement opportunities, it talks about how the procurement agents that have been approved, evaluated, and pre-qualified by USAID itself and found them to have good standard quality assurance and control system, then these are organizations that they will approve them and they will be able to source from the local manufacturers, meaning that if there is any procurement tendency, tenders, it is the local manufacturers will not participate in the procurement tender, but the USAID approved procurement agents will participate. And this is especially for products, especially that have been banned from importing into Nigeria, some essential medicines that we as an organization cannot import into this country. So we make use of the approved procurement agents who will evaluate your quality assurance, your quality control, your documentations, and other processes to see if you are able to meet their requirements. They will visit your manufacturing plant and then give you their own specifications or requirements after the evaluation. And if you are able to meet their requirements, then if there is any procurement tender, and knowing that the tender is for products that cannot be imported into this country because of NAFDAC requirements, then they will be able to source the product from your company. So basically, these are just the two ways that we recommend for the local manufacturers. The one for the WHO, I know it involves a lot of some resources, and therefore the interest to spend more in terms of capital, human, and even the plan itself. So it's like the willingness and the interest to upgrade your quality to that standard must be there first. And as you know, the procurement process is all about competition. It's not as if you reach these standards, you will win any procurement tender. You will be competing with, because the procurement process is a global one. The competition is open globally, not just to Nigeria. It is limited to Nigeria only when those products are banned from importation, or there are products that are on NAFDAC ceilings. In that case, such competition will be limited to only manufacturers who have been evaluated by the procurement agents and you have passed, or you are a pre-qualified manufacturer, then you can participate in submitting your quotation to them. They will evaluate. If they have 2 or 3 manufacturers that they have pre-qualified in Nigeria, all of you will be invited to participate and evaluated based on price, since all of you have already passed their pre-qualification. So price at that level will be the determining price, and probably the lead time will be the determining factor. I think that's all. Not so much. The requirements are few, just two sources. Like I said, the US and the stringent, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the only two that concerns us and that we're likely to benefit from. I think I will stop here. And thank you for listening. And then if there are questions, because this is just to stimulate you to maybe come out with questions, and then during the that session, maybe more explanation can come up. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Friday, for that presentation. I think that has been well spelled out for people who are consciously listening to what you've been saying. And so if there are questions from participants, please, you can raise up your hand, or maybe you kindly unmute so that you can hear your view. Thank you. Okay, someone has a question. Please, you can go ahead. You can kindly unmute and
Thank you very much, Friday and Violet, for your presentations. Friday, I would just like to ask a question. You specifically mentioned that I want to ask a question about wholesalers who, for instance, actually do procure from organizations that do not manufacture in country.
Hello, I can't hear anyone.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Friday and Violet. It's very, very much appreciated. I would just like to ask a question that maybe some of us in the audience are thinking about. And that question is the fact that, okay, if for instance, you're a wholesaler, you're a distributor, and you represent companies that are abroad, but you distribute for them in Nigeria, how would you be able to qualify to supply donor programs? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure that question is to me, Friday.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, so for a wholesaler or distributor that you import from, like say, from countries with a stringent regulatory authority, right?
Yes, we're talking about importers that import from other countries, not specifically with a stringent regulation. No. But let's say they import and they want to supply to donor programs. What do they need to do? What must their suppliers be qualified to do? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the process is, it goes like this. In that case, you know, I mentioned about USAID approved procurement agents, and throughout my discussion, you will remember that there's no way, and most of these companies in Nigeria are qualified to participate on this procurement tender unless either through WHO or US approved procurement agents. So for a distributor or somebody who is importing such products, the only way that you can be able to participate in US procurement tender is to submit like an expression of interest to any of the USAID approved procurement agents who will come to your company and evaluate your good distribution practice, because it's not just enough to bring in quality products from anywhere or from any part of the world. They will also want to evaluate and see during your warehouse to be sure that during the transportation and storage, the integrity of those products are not affected. So the process is that you submit an expression of interest to any of the USAID approved procurement agents. Example, Medical Export Group is a USAID approved procurement agents, and they have a representative in Nigeria. So for those of you who are interested and would like to invite them to maybe evaluate your, if you are a wholesaler or a manufacturer and you are interested, you can submit your expression of interest to their representative in Nigeria. And if they have interest, they'll be able to, to engage them in a discussion, because they will tell you their processes, and then you look at it. If you are interested to continue with that, then the negotiation or discussion or pre-qualification continues. I hope I've answered your questions.
Thank you very much, you have. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir, Mr. Friday. So there's a question in the chat box. Maybe I should just read it out for you.
Please read it out for me.
Okay, all right. Is there a list of USAID approved procurement agents?
Yes, thank you very much. There is, like I just mentioned one, if you are a medical expert group in the Netherlands is one. We have International Dispensary Association, IDA is one. We have IMRES is one. We have Mission Pharma. I think there are about 5 or 6. But for a quick way that you can get any of this, I know of all these 6 or 5 is only medical export group that have a presence in Nigeria, which you can easily get in contact with. Thank you. Have I answered your question?
Okay, sir. Yes, that has been answered. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much.
All right. I don't know if there are any other questions. If you want to ask your questions, you can kindly unmute or put your questions into the chat box. So it seems, okay. All right. So it seems there are no questions. Okay. All right. So I think we have to move on to the next agenda. Okay. This is just to inform the attendees that the presentation slides and the recordings will be shared with us after this session. So just look it up to your email, probably today, before the end of today, or first thing on Monday, you have it in your emails. Okay, so on our next agenda is closing remarks, and I'm going to call on Mrs. Christine Oyewo, who is the head of GS1 Healthcare in Nigeria. So, Mrs. Christine. Okay. All right. I was told that there's a question in the chat box. Okay. The question is this only for medical related cases? Mr. Friday, are you still there?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a question here. Please, okay, is this only for medical related cases?
I don't know. What is?
I think the question is what you will be supplying. Is it strictly medical related?
Yeah, pharmaceuticals in general. The rules for lab consumables are not as stringent as pharmaceuticals. So these are mainly, majorly for pharmaceuticals. I hope that's clarified anyway.
Yes, it's clear. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. So like I said earlier on, somebody is asking if they can have the recording. Yes, the recording will be available, and so the presentation slides too. We'll send it via your email. So without wasting much of our time, I'm going to be calling the healthcare lead GS1 Nigeria in person of Mrs. Christine Oyewo to give us the closing remarks. Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. I don't know if it's 12 o'clock yet. I just want to give a few closing remarks. First of all, we want to thank GHS PSM for actually coming on and providing a good deal of detailed information about the role of GS1 standards in actually being a requirement to supply donor funded programs. We also want to thank you for also giving the audience information about what they need, you know, in terms of distributors and other requirements that they actually have to actually make sure that they comply with to supply donor funded programs. So thank you very much, Friday. Thank you very much, Violet. I want to thank Mr. Vincent Ajulo, who has worked so hard to make sure that this webinar does happen. But just to mention something, GS1 standards is actually global standards. And one thing about GS1's global standards is that why donor-funded agencies are so particular about having them implemented in their supply chains is that they actually do provide what we call supply chain efficiency. They also provide what we call a single point of truth. And for other reasons, apart from that, they actually help to ensure that patients get medicines in for donor funded programs in order to achieve the objectives of such programs. So GS1 standards actually help to make sure that the right product gets to the right place and to the right patient as when due. The fact also remains that when companies do implement GS1 standards, they actually see cost savings with respect to the fact that they're able to manage their inventory more efficiently. They're able to actually demonstrate a good return of investment. NAFTA have also find GS1 standards particularly interesting because they're actually at the forefront of using GS1 standards for the implementation of national traceability. So NAFTA are actually playing a leading role in actually ensuring that GS1 standards are used for the implementation of track and trace among pharmaceutical products in Nigeria. And what is this all to achieve? This all to achieve supply chain visibility and to make sure that our supply chains are actually free from the influx of fake, adulterated, and substandard products. So we want to thank all of you that were able to take time today to attend this webinar. We thank you for your time. We thank you for the questions that you asked and for the interest that you portrayed in, of course, taking your time out to listen for about 1.5 hours. So I would just like to now close the webinar and also thank you very much. All the presentations and the recordings are going to be shared, or the recordings are actually going to be shared. So you can, to everybody that did register for the webinar. So we want to thank you very much. So I want to pass it over back to Julius. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. See you some other time. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Actually,